Hey everybody, this is Perch. A lot of people cite the New Gods as characters in the DC kind of landscape that they love, but it's remarkable how kind of few people really know those comics. That in many cases they have kind of a vague sense of the New Gods from maybe more recent books, but and then this idea that Jack Kirby was involved somehow, so therefore they must be great. And if, by the way, it's not a terrible idea. Jack Kirby being involved does tend to make things good. But the New Gods, the reason why I personally like the New Gods is that there was an element, and I think this is a little bit what Kieran Gillen was trying to tap into with Eternals when he was doing the Marvel series, but recently. But there was an element of just kind of crazy off the wall stuff. You'd have a page, there'd be a lot of kind of cosmic action. It was definitely a lot of kind of bigger, kind of bigger exposition that you'd get from some of these characters, sometimes kind of maddeningly so. But you'd get kind of very left turn, I don't say plot twists, but just kind of environment twists. It's like, the New Gods are on, some kind of, extra dimensional space planet, and they're dealing with some otherworldly kind of government chaos that's going on, and then they're on a dinosaur planet, and it's like it kind of went all over the place, and there was something kind of magical. And it put it this way, I'll sum it this: people ask me why do I like the New Gods and a lot of the Kirby stuff. It's because anything could happen, and when it did happen, the visuals were just at times hard to wrap your mind around it because they were so expansive and crazy. And that was one of the really cool things about Kirby. More people have probably been exposed to Kirby through Fantastic Four and some of those comics. And if you remember issues where, the Fantastic Four have some kind of space adventure or negative zone stuff, I mean, that was like a tenth of what you got with New Gods. And it was still, the art was so wild, it was hard to mentally process, I guess is the best way to put it. People today, there's a handful of people who get hung up on, Kirby's figures and faces look old fashioned, or it looks dated. It was definitely a style that you don't see a lot of today. But they missed the bigger picture of kind of the panels flow, the work that was going on, and you just had so much expansive detail. Today you could get like a, Paul Pope or Sharon or Mobius, or you have people, I don't know if that counts as today, but you've had certainly other people who have tapped into some of this. Chris Bachalo, one of the reasons why I like his work is often because he does such kind of otherworldly environments, just rarely has a chance to these days when you're doing a Spider-Man variant cover. Anyway, let me read this mail because it's about New Gods. So with that preamble, it says, "Morning Perch. So I am somewhat checked out on new comics and actually offloading the bulk of my collection to clean house, so to speak. But this jumped out at me. I know everyone has been buzzing about Absolute Batman and all. It's not really doing much for me, but I'm glad to see others having more than Mark Millar's books to get excited for. But this New Gods by Ram V and Evan Cagle, artist, is damned exciting as a longtime fan of both Kirby's New Gods Forever People, Mr. Miracle, and Walt Simonson, John Burns editions. It's been a while since I've seen a New God-related title, and I'm genuinely excited for it. I was for Tom King's, then, well, let's get back to being positive." Yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, I'll briefly give this. I hear in the interest of being fair to my kind of my own biases and points of view, I like the Kirby expansive anything can happen New Gods, like I started this video with. I love the Forever People were not really something that should have happened in comic logic, but it did, and it was crazy and it was wonderful. On one hand, Tom King coming in to do his take on a Mr. Miracle kind of New God style story is, exciting in a sense of here's a different creator doing a different take on a book. And I think I'm in for that. I do want to, I like the classics and I kind of always want to see the classics moving, but having creators come in and give their own touches on things is also kind of exciting. The problem is, it wasn't a bold new take on Mr. Miracle New Gods. It was Tom King's depression centered, his depression centered take on New Gods. It was Tom King being, doing his bit. And I know I've said this before, and I'll move on because there's no point doing it again. But there's got to be more to those stories. I mean, than just things sad. It's and I'm boiling it down too much, but less than you think. The comic books are incredibly stale. And if you like that type of story, fine, but there is really nothing. But it's the exact opposite of what I loved about Kirby, and anything could happen. Not anything can happen in Tom King's books. It's going to be a Tom King special of what will happen. There is no anything can happen. Just his bit, his usual bit. That's what you're going to get. It's like if you're going to a Bobcat Goldthwait, stand-up routine and you're expecting, eloquent, well-spoken poetry. You're not going to get that there. How about that? How about that reference, huh? Pulled that out of the distant past. Anyway, back to the mail. So Sal handled the interview really well, in my opinion. I always like that guy's approach to talking comics. Really would like to hear what you think of this. And then there's a little link to the YouTube video of the interview. It says, it seems like DC is rallying again overall. It's not something I expected. Thanks for the hours of entertaining content. Don't take this as a compliment. Sorry to hear about the health issues. I really didn't even notice until you mentioned it recently. That's time's a real motherfucker and sneaks up on you. I wish it was time. For what it's worth, I wish it was time, but unfortunately, no. Anyway, thank you for the nice words. Yeah, it was weird because I've definitely been struggling with it, and what I've realized, and this is more of a true thing on life, is you're told on one hand to fight through it, and that's, I guess, my generation. I don't want to be. I'm not a person who's going to put health issues front and center and really talk about that. I'm going to be somebody who takes every bit of enjoyment and distraction that I can, and I do. But what's funny about that is that's what they say you should do, and then people will turn around and say, you don't sound that sick to me. So I don't know what we're. And there's a couple places where I definitely could use some help, and it was not there. But anyway, family was, of course, and that's what counts in the end. Blah blah blah. All right, we'll get off that topic. So yeah, Rob V, we'll see. I hear different interviews with his take on New Gods, and I'm at a point now, unfortunately, where I'm not sure what I'm going to get with this book. A lot of things are being said. Some of them are the right things. Some of them are out of left field. The comment that Bleach is going to be some inspiration is a weird one for me. I mean, a really weird one for me. And I've started to get this feeling, and I'm just, again, I'm in the spirit of being honest with you. I'm getting the feeling in a lot of these interviews and a lot of these comments that, the right things are being said to play to the audience, which, by the way, isn't a bad thing, but hopefully it's true. It's like, hey, we know some of this audience likes manga. Let's throw in a manga inspiration. Hey, we know that people like Kirby. Let's throw in a Kirby inspiration. I'm at a point now where I'm just anxious to see the book and see if it actually is these things, because there's been a decent amount of, I guess, interviews and comments where people are like, yeah, we're taking inspiration from all these greatest hits of things you love. And then the comic comes out. It's like, okay, no, you clearly weren't doing that. Somebody who's notorious for doing this was Dan Slott, who would say, this run's really going to pull from some of the, John Romita Sr., gyms that were out there, and some of the kind of these classic moments. And it's like, no, I don't get, I'm sorry. You told us a story about Peter Parker being a tech bro. What are you talking about? There's been too much casual, and people do that with Kirby a lot. Like, we're really going to infuse a Kirby crackle into these pages, and you open it up, it's like, okay. It's I'm not getting it. Now, that said, that disclaimer, that negativity, that pessimism aside, Rob V, he's not a clown. I think he's generally tried to deliver what he says he's going to deliver. And so I don't think there's any reason to think he's just, there's a couple people, Dan Slott being one of them, where I'm pretty sure at this point he knows exactly that he's not giving people what he's claiming he's going to give people, and he's just doing it to kind of f with them, and that's how it feels anyway. Um, with there's been no evidence that Rob V pulls those kinds of games, so I'm optimistic that he is what he says he is, and he's trying to deliver the thing that he claims, and I hope so. I hope it's all those things. Broader than that, DC is trying to rally. Clearly, I think there's a renewed sense of that probably plays into a few things. I think that there was I mean, bluntly, and maybe this is a longer video. I think there was a time where several of the DC execs were kind of in a malaise. People weren't showing up for work. You couldn't find them. Emails and phone calls weren't being answered. That people were asleep at the wheel. And then came this rumor, and well, not just rumor, but this activity around Universal trying to at least buy or purchase DC. And so you had a kind of this interesting thing happen where I think a handful of creators kind of worked themselves up to say, hey, you know what? They're not really paying attention, so let's just go for it and see what we can do. And I think that spiraled a little bit, or in a good way. I think that worked. I think some people kind of worked themselves up into trying to really go for it. I also think you got this weird kind of flee from Marvel for a bunch of a bunch of Marvel creators escaped to go over to DC and kind of start to do the same shit at DC that they had done over at Marvel. And I think I would say by and large backfired, but it didn't really move the needle with anything. And so I think you had a handful of creators who were more DC originals going, you know what, fuck this. We're not going to let this happen. I don't know. Something did happen. I am seeing more DC creators legitimately try and do things. I think some of it is working. I see a renewed sense of enthusiasm from some of the editorial. So, hopefully so. We're better. The world is better if we have a stronger DC. I think Marvel needs, frankly, the somebody nipping at their heels a little bit. And if DC pulls it all off, I think they can actually be in a world where they can, start to take the momentum. It's not showing up in the sales. That's kind of the one tough part about all this is DC's throwing stuff at the wall, trying to do stuff. And, they're still struggling. Marvel's still winning, but the overall pie is still low. So here's hoping. I acknowledge what you say. I acknowledge you. I think there is a sense of renewed atmosphere, and I hope that that carries over. Anyway, what do you think, guys? Are you excited for DC? Are you excited for New Gods? What do you like about this stuff? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. And thanks for listening.